Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by composer Emoi, whose work includes working with B.B. King, The Killers, and composing for Nicolas Cage's Willy's Wonderland, just to name a few things. Welcome to the show, Emoi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question for you would be, how did you get into composing? Like, what was it that attracted you to it, and how'd you get involved in that?
That's a good question. Well, I started out, in choir at a very, very young age. So I toured like in church groups and things like that. But I always had terrible stage fright. And even when I started performing live in my teens and early 20s, I couldn't beat the stage fright really. I mean, it was just, I never felt very at home on stage. So eventually, I started realizing, you can write music for films and stay in a dark studio all day long, all night. And so I started by getting into commercials, and I just loved it. I loved it so much, and I felt that was where my skill set was, because I was just more of a writer, and a behind the scenes person,
One of the things that's sort of disappeared from commercials is jingles. Do you ever get a chance to write jingles, or are you like, no, I don't like jingles anymore?
No, I've written a lot of really good jingles. I wrote the Happy Honda Days holiday song. I don't know if you've ever heard it. I don't know where you live, which state or what have you, but in California it was quite large. But it was Happy Honda Days are here. Happy Honda Day. We're saving tons of moolah, avoiding all the hoopla, the greatest event of the year. So I wrote that. I'm trying to think of some of the others. I wrote a lot of music for the San Francisco Giants. I wrote, I know I've written many more jingles I can't think of off the top of my head, but for a lot of sports teams and things like that. Yeah. And I think that's what translated to Willy's Wonderland so well, was that commercial jingle experience, to write that, because I wrote the song that was the commercial song for Willy's Wonderland. So
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. How did you get involved with the Willy's Wonderland? Like, how did you make that transition?
Willy's Wonderland? So basically with Willy's Wonderland, I had a friend who was a producer on the film who he knew that I was a huge fan of B horror films. This was kind of like, not something a lot of people knew, that I was just this kind of crazy B horror film fan. And he hit me up and he said, hey, we need a composer. Let me send you the script. So he sent me the script, and I just freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to score this movie. Like, I called him back. I said, I don't want to. I have to score this movie. And so, I got on, and the very first demo that I did was creating the commercial, so they had shot this commercial, rough footage of this commercial, sent me the Willy's Wonderland commercial. It had no sound on it. And I put the Willy's jingle, we call it the Willy's jingle, on there. And that was it. Everybody loved it. And the birthday song. So yeah.
What is your go-to B horror movie then?
Well, I mean, gosh, I love Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah.
I love Return of the Living Dead. I mean, you name it, like all those movies in that era, Ghoulies, everything.
So did you go like reference those styles in your music, or did you try and sort of create a new path? Like, how did you approach creating the music for this movie?
For the Accursed or for Willy's?
For Willy's.
For Willy's, I would say, yeah, I wrote on Willy's. It was a unique opportunity because I voiced Willy Weasel and I did all the song, every song pretty much almost that's in the movie, right? But we had to make a difference, like head, shoulders, knees, and toes. I became like, a Western singer, because it was the pandemic, everything was closed down. So there was no studios open. There was no bringing anybody in, you know what I mean? So I had to kind of jump into a bunch of these characters. And so, I referenced a lot of all kinds of different music for Willy's Wonderland, because like, obviously the main title theme is like total 80s new wave, The Cure meets New Order, and when he's dancing to the pinball machine and all that kind of stuff. So it really was just a huge thing. But yes, I mean, definitely the 80s B horror vibe for the score section of Willy's for sure. Yeah.
So which was your favorite?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, which was your favorite part then? Because like you love making scores and making music, but then there's also like fun things like the jingles. So like, is there a particular part where you're like, oh, that was the most fun, or was there a particular moment in the film that you really enjoyed?
There was one of the parts that was the most fun was actually writing Six Little Chickens. So they sent me the movie, and there's that scene. Willy's just on stage going like this. There was no temp music. There was no nothing. And I don't know if anybody really had an idea what exactly he would be singing in that moment, but here he is. And they're like, he's hypnotizing the kids, basically getting their attention so Nighty Night can sneak up behind him and get them. And so, I was like, gosh, what could he possibly be singing about? You know what I mean? What could it possibly be? So it was really fun to create like a dark, scary kids song that Six Little Chickens representing the 6 kids. 4 of them are roosters, 4 boys and 2 hens, 2 girls. And, they're at the end of the line. And then schlack, he gets them right at the end when it's like, now there's 5 little chickens at the end of the line. You know what I mean? So that was quite fun. And also just syncing it to his voice, because that was all cut. So I had to, that was all edited. So I had to make sure the song also fit to his mouth movements. And when it showed him and stuff like that, he couldn't be singing, obviously, when he's not singing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was a challenge, but it was really, really fun.
I do hope it becomes like Ring Around the Rosie, where in 100 years we'll all be like, this is the most creepy song a kid could sing.
Yeah. Well, that song, as far as streaming is concerned, it's the 2nd most streamed song on the entire soundtrack, which was quite a surprise.
Yeah.
It has like millions of listens on YouTube Music, and it's pretty cool, and lots on Spotify too. So
how'd you become the voice of Willy?
Well, I think it was just, again, I did that demo and I kind of wanted to sell it through. So you kind of have to demo it out, like how it's going to go. And I just heard Willy talking through it, because if you ever go to like Chuck E. Cheese, like I grew up, during the time of Chuck E. Cheese when it was in its heyday.
Yeah.
One of the important parts is that the banter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that I really wanted them to have that banter. And so Willy going like, that's right. Oh yeah, kids, all that kind of stuff over the top of the music. So when I did the Willy's jingle and the birthday song, I put that in there just as a placeholder of me doing it. But they really loved it, and they were like, I don't know. They were like, I don't think there's going to be anybody who can top this voice, because I have this high, shrilly kind of voice that works.
Yeah.
for Willy. So that was it. It just they kind of did it. And then also I have singing background, so whoever voiced Willy had to be able to sing as well. You know what I mean?
How did you get into character for it then? Like, did you have anything you prepped, or you just went straight away and did it? How did you approach that?
No, I definitely got into character because it was interesting, because the whole time I was working on Willy's, life just felt mentally ill. You know what I mean? We're in the middle of this pandemic. It's the first time in my life I've experienced anything where there's like this shutdown, total isolation, hair growing long, haven't gotten my hair cut, you know what I mean? And just kind of getting into this space, and it kind of felt like what a serial killer might feel, you know what I mean? Like that isolation and that kind of hermitous thing. And I'm doing this dark music and watching this movie over and over and over and over and over again, doing all this stuff. And I kind of started feeling like, okay, well, what if what if this was like how Willy, you know, like when Jerry Robert Willis, who was the live character of Willy, you know, before his soul went into the animatronic,
Yeah.
you know, what if he was in this dark Willy's Wonderland space, you know, writing these songs alone in the middle of Hayesville, Nevada, in the middle of nowhere, you know what I mean? And just kind of like, you know, going into the dark and like, you know, what would it sound like? And of course, he wants the voice to sound appealing like a cartoon character, but at the same time, there's got to be something off about it. You know what I mean? So I kind of thought, well, who kind of has that? And so I thought of Lampwick from Pinocchio, you know, and I thought of Christian Slater from like Heathers and stuff like that. Christian Slater has always had. So you got Christian Slater, you know, who's like, all right, so I did blow up the school, all the schools. Now that you're dead, what are you gonna do with your life, huh? And then you got Lampwick, you know, hey, Pinocchio, right? You combine them together, and you got, hey, kids, you know what time it is? It's birthday time. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like that was kind of the inspiration behind Willy.
Would you actually go and do more voiceover work if it was available?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really think about it too much. I haven't really thought about it. Composing is such a full-time, unbelievably demanding job. Yeah. You know what I mean? I don't even know how I would get, but if somebody approached me or something and was like, hey, you know, we want to do, or like say Screen Media approached me, wanted to do something else, Willy's Wonderland, I would definitely be open to it, you know? Yeah. But I don't think I have really a voice for voiceovers. I record a lot of voiceovers, and I obviously do a lot of commercials. Like I said, I have a high, more shrilly voice than voiceover people, you know, like the James Earl Jones and the Morgan Freemans of the world, you know, works for an evil evil weasel, but that's about it.
Well, it's funny because I worked at a sound studio when I first got into the industry, and I was like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to be a voiceover artist. Like, I obviously don't have the voice. And the guy, mixer, just looked at me, he's like, you don't have the voice. And I was like, you crushed me. You just crushed my dreams, man.
There's a timbre that the voiceover actors have, you know, it's just like so full. Yeah. You know? It fills up a lot of frequencies, and my voice fits in a smaller frequency range for sure. Yeah.
What, so like you get the script, how do you take notes in it, or do you make notes in the margins, or like how do you approach it when you get the script to sort of figure out what you're going to design for the sound?
Well, you definitely off the script, you start getting ideas, and you start playing with creating templates, putting together a lot of instruments that you think will fit this movie. But one thing I have definitely learned in doing over 300 commercials now and 2 feature films and a lot of short films is that you can have the grandest of intentions going in, but you never really know what it's going to be until you see it and feel it. It comes down to the acting, the color, the character, you know what I mean? The way it's shot, everything changes. And you know, before you go in, so many times directors or agencies or whatever, they'll be like, oh, we want this to sound like, you know, this and that, we did that. But then once the picture comes together, you put that reference track or that temp track on it, totally doesn't fit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, because the movie has a way of becoming its own entity, whether anybody likes it or not. It develops its own personality for sure. And so your job as a composer is to very quickly be able to interpret the personality of that picture and be able to create a sound bed that helps elevate the story, you know, the narrative, the acting, everything else. So yes, on Willy's, you know, had a lot of ideas for different music and stuff, but when it actually came together and we started watching it, we realized, you know, yeah, this is going to be its own thing, you know, for the most part. And
so how did it change? Like, how did you guys, like, what was your initial intention when you read the script versus what you ended up sort of being inspired to do when you saw the footage?
Well, so you know, we had thought that, like, I think, you know, we thought that the music would be kind of more, I think, heavier throughout, like more of just a real kick-ass kind of like, you know, Avenged Sevenfolds, you know, kind of thing, you know, sort of, you know, just more heavy. And what ended up happening was like the kids' songs and the quirkiness of the movie ended up inspiring more of a, you know, quirky instrumentation, more like orchestral stuff. You know, like one of the cool ideas was, you know, when the animatronics attack Nick, it's orchestral,
Okay.
right? And it's clunky and funky, right? Orchestral. But when he fights back, it's the exact same, well, not the exact same, but very similar motif or theme, except it's now electric guitar rock band, right? So when Ozzy's, you know, attacking, and then when Nick fights back, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, that ended up, you know, you just find those things, but you can't find them until you see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because that I am always interested in that, because you see the script come in and then they shoot and the actors change everything, the editors cut everything up, everything sort of shifts. And so it's always fascinating to see what people change because of how the footage looks. And so that's why I was interested in that. Now, you originally taught yourself a lot of the instruments you learned. How do you get from, because I've taught myself stuff, not instruments, but like, you know, there's a difference between me teaching myself and being a professional in it. So how did you make that leap from self-taught to professional?
Gosh, that's a good question. I guess practice. A lot of practice, you know. Yeah, you know, I started with vocals. That was kind of more of the classically trained sort of thing. And then I moved on to piano. I never really took too much lessons in that, but it was, you know, just, you know, rehearsing, you know, you basically learning other people's music is one of the best ways that I've learned. So, you know, especially, and when you can't, you know, when you can't really read music for piano, you're like, you know, you're forced to figure it out by ear. And I think a lot of that really helps. The ear training when you're self-taught is really quite good. You know what I mean? So I did a lot of that, and then I moved on to guitar, and then I moved on to bass and stuff. And you know, it just, once you kind of get piano and guitar down, a lot of other instruments will fall into place for you, you know? And then from there out, you sort of, you know, notes are notes, and you just find, you know, if you've listened to enough music, you know how things should feel. You just have to find that, you know, and just, yeah, like I said, a lot of practice. I mean, there were a lot of years that I was very terrible at music, a lot of years, you know. But eventually you just keep going and going and going, and then it clicks, you know.
Now, you've also done tons of, you know, campaigns like Apple, Google, Facebook, TEDx, eBay. How do you, like, what is the difference between approaching a commercial versus approaching a feature film?
Huge difference. Mainly when you're on a commercial, typically you've got the client, right? Say Google, right? That client can have an internal agency. That internal agency can hire an external agency. That external agency can hire a director. And then there's the chain of command within the client as well, like the CFO, the CEO, like all the different people up the ladder. So when you're dealing with a commercial, there's a lot of different steps to get through, and it can be kind of jarring, really. I mean, it can be kind of frustrating too. You know what I mean? So you have to really get good at listening, you know, and not doing your own thing, really. You know, it's like when you're on a commercial. On a film, you can get a little bit more freedom, I feel like, because you're mostly dealing with the director. And you know, I was so lucky to deal with Kevin on Willy's Wonderland and the Accursed, because he really gives me, you know, quite a bit of freedom. But he's sort of the you know, he's the decision maker, really, and then that goes up to just the producers. And then the studio. But typically, if the director likes it, the producers are typically going to like it. The studio is typically going to like it. It's a little bit easier because nobody wants to step on the toes of the director. You know what I mean? But in the agency world, commercial world, the director is more of a hire like you are. You know what I mean? It's less about their vision. It's more about their technical skill. You know, a lot of times. Sometimes about the vision, but you know, depends on how artful the commercial is. But a lot of times,
and how big the director is, right? Like if they bring in, you know, whoever,
Yeah.
David Fincher, it's like, okay, well,
Exactly.
we're gonna let him
Yeah.
run.
But the agency typically writes the script, writes the
Yeah.
whole campaign, so they feel more of a like more on the line for the so they really want it how they've envisioned it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's basically the difference between a commercial and working on a film. Yeah.
What was the like? I guess take us through that moment where you first heard some of your music playing on a commercial. Like I feel like it'd be equivalent of hearing your band on the radio or something. We're like, holy crap, there it is.
It's awesome. I mean, one of the things though I feel like I have to say is, that we're going to get philosophical now for a second here, but basically, life is obviously a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people get hung up on, gosh, I can't wait till my song's on the radio. Gosh, I can't wait till my commercial's done. If I could score I remember thinking, like, if I could score a feature film, I would be able to die a happy man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then Willy's came out, and I was surprised how little I felt, really, and how much I was ready to do the next one. You know what I mean? And so I've definitely realized that the journey is definitely more important than the destination, for sure. With that said, though, I mean, hearing your stuff on TV and stuff, it is very cool, but it's not as like, oh my gosh, as you might think. At least for me, it wasn't. You know what I mean? Because I'm now thinking, what do I have to do to keep going? You know what I mean? So yeah.
Is there one where you're like, why? Because I remember there would be commercials where it's like it plays repeatedly, and you're just, by the end you're like, I hate this commercial. Was there one where you're like, why are they playing my commercial again?
Happy Honda days. I mean, you turned on the radio, that was on. You turned on the TV, that was on every 5 seconds. But it's still great. But yeah, there's definitely some of those where, what's more frustrating than that actually is when you come off of a campaign, and you've listened to the same 30 seconds, because again, you got to remember with commercials, typically the music's 30 to 45 seconds long, right? So you listen to it a million times the same 30 seconds. At least with a film, you get to break it up and listen to sections for a long period of time. With a commercial, you are spending a lot of time on 30 seconds of music. And when you're off of it, you're humming it for like a month. You know what I mean? And that is more frustrating than anything else,
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked about jingles, because I'm always walking around driving my wife nuts, just singing jingles from like 30 years ago. It's just, and she's just like, what are you doing? Like, that's not even, it hasn't been on in 20 years. And like, still in my head.
I've gotten hate mail from people because of the birthday song on Willy's. They're like, it's stuck in my head. Seriously, man. I mean, come on, man. I'm like,
that's a sign of a good song then, right? Because it's catchy.
When you're walking around, it's your birthday. I feel sorry for him.
Now, I have one last question I like to ask everyone I interview. And what would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I would say that it is Desperate Housewives.
Oh, no way. My wife is like,
I freaking love Desperate Housewives. It's just such a well done, campy, dark, wonderful little series that I watch over and over again, every year or two, Now,
are you all caught up, or are you like?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because my wife,
watched the whole thing several times.
Yeah. Because my wife has been keeping me up on all the gossip, what's happening in the show. And I'm like, wow, really? So, well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Oh, thank you, Gordon.
Yes. And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Raquel. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.